Hey, good afternoon. I think our entire court has now joined our Zoom session. And give me a thumbs up if y'all can hear me. Great. We're streaming live to our Scott County Fiscal Court YouTube channel. And appreciate your all's flexibility in joining me today to discuss and answer questions in regards to our draft budget that has been worked on by the budget committee, and appreciate David and Alvin's efforts on behalf of the budget committee to help get us to where we are today so that we can present this for your consideration and questions and discussion. I'm going to try to share a screen just of the document that you all have. And should be visible now. This is just in general, our draft first page. And I want to talk about, just some thought processes that the budget committee had as we worked through this. And we had spent a lot of time and a lot of effort with Capital Projects Committee and many meetings. We had a community forum, but with the situation that faces us now with COVID-19, it's apparent that those items have to go on the back burner, and we need to look at making sure that we prioritize services. And right now, our question is where do we hit bottom on revenue? And it'd be irresponsible of us if we did not make that a priority in our conversation, and that has been a priority. And what we've determined in looking back at historical information and talking with some folks here in the state, what we have estimated a reduction in revenue for next year, possibly being as much as 30%. And that's what's reflected in this budget on our payroll tax and our net profits tax. And we started there and had that conversation, and that's what led us to make those projections. But from that, looking at those possible revenue reductions, we thought it was very important that we try to prioritize services and maintaining the level that we have now with the current staffing level. The budget committee wanted to recommend that even though we had several requests for new staff, didn't feel like it was appropriate right now, and that we would consider a 6-month reassessment in December sometime, looking at where we were with revenue and such, but did not feel like it was appropriate at this time to add any additional staff. And we've talked to department chairs and department heads and constitutional officers about that matter. And after 6 months, we'll come back, and if the court wants to consider that, then we can look at it then. But that was another thing. And then, I mentioned the Capital Projects Committee, and at this time, it's just not appropriate to add large capital projects to this budget in my mind, and the budget committee didn't feel like that as well. And this budget reflects that as well. Looking at our, just dollars comparisons from last year to this year, just the general fund, there's a reduction in $5,390,724. The road fund reflected a reduction of $139,469. We felt like we needed to move forward with paving projects if we could, and we felt like we could. So that is recommendation there, and doesn't reflect a lot of reduction, but it doesn't have any new dump trucks or any new vehicles in the road fund. We do have a line in there for some machinery and equipment, but no new vehicles or capital projects other than road paving. And then on our jail fund budget, I want to point out something that's very important to me to make sure that we share this. You know, looking at last year's jail budget, it was $3,641,832. Well, this year's recommendation to the court is for $3,998,102. And I want to make it clear that $276,500 of that difference has been added in there for the court to consider partnering with a program like the Shepherd's House or the Isaiah House. And it also reflects a difference where we have partnered with CCA on the home incarceration program. And those funds, after conferencing with the Department for Local Government, their recommendation and direction that we received from them is that those funds go under the jail fund. And just being trying to communicate where everybody's at, you know, Jailer Broyles doesn't oversee either one of those and was concerned about having that in his budget line items. But from conversations and direction from the Department of Local Government, who oversees and approves our budget, that was the advice and direction that we got. So I wanted to just share that and make sure everybody understood where we were at on that. Overall, if you look at the combined all the funds, an overall reduction of $5,175,423. So, you know, the work of the budget committee to try to trim and pare things back has been pretty extensive. And I'd like to call on David or Alvin to give any comments, if you would. And I'm going to try to scroll down just a little bit so you can see those bottom numbers for the totals for the general fund, road fund, jail fund. And then you have LGEA fund, which is always the same. And then those two smaller funds that we have as well that accounts for the grand total there of $37,971,484. So David or Alvin, would either one of you all be willing to share some thoughts about the work that went into just the general thought process of the budget? And then before they do, I do want to talk about the thought process was that we as we discussed in our last meeting, that the recommendation for the third phase of the salary compensation study is the experience factor, and adding in prior experience for similar jobs to our current employees' experience. And Jeff Mudrack's worked on that quite a bit. We've shared the data in the email with you all in regards to that, and be happy to try to answer any questions. But the budget committee's recommendation is to include that third phase, that third and final phase, in this budget, and it would be reflected there in July 1. As we shared earlier, I think there's 77 employees that would be impacted by this adjustment. And Jeff Mudrack's on here, and he can comment on that if anyone has any questions. But I'm going to stop and ask David or Alvin if they'd like to share anything. And I'm going to stop sharing this. If we come back to it, we can. David, Alvin, could you all share anything? Alvin, I need to, let me unmute you. Sorry, Alvin.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Yeah, we went through line by line, made the best estimates we could. I did want to talk about the increase in the jail fund there. We've got those, the possible contract with either Shepherd's House or the Isaiah House, whichever one we go with, and the home incarceration. We got that cost in there, but if those get going, they should reduce some of the other costs at the jail, but because of timing, we could not reduce. We don't want to cripple Jailer Broyles being able to operate till those got up and going, but I don't expect to use both of those full amounts because one should offset the other. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, sir. David?
Yeah, one other thing as well is we also took out some large vehicle purchases, not just building projects, capital projects, but holding off on some of those purchases that add up to a large amount of money as well. So I feel like it's a pretty, could the budget be leaner? It could, but it would do some pretty tough times on the county employees and being able to do their job. And it's something we'll just have to look at as we go. So the budget's just a framework of what we'll spend. It doesn't mean we're going to spend all of it.
No, and in conversations with department heads that I've had, I've asked them all to minimize spending to just essentials, out of the remainder of this budget, and just trying to be the best stewards of what we have. One change that I need to make note of is we had discussed, there's a line item that we actually changed from our original, what we sent yesterday. And it was, I don't have the daggone number, but we added the monies to complete in the change order payoff and the balance payoff of the cupola project for the clock tower. That was not included in yesterday's.
899,742.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. I knew you would be able to ring off that line number, but
No problem.
we changed that. And then Stacy, I might need you to help me. Brandon Rimley, we had one mistake on, it was out of the telephone line. I think it was 540-573.
Yes.
We had inadvertently reduced that to 8,500, and it needed to be, I think 16.5, because there is there's a CAD system adjustment with the new CAD system, radio system that we have. And that adjustment piece of software that he needs to add in there will allow his first responders to receive that information directly on their cell phones. And he thought it was very important to be able to add that. So that was a partial mistake on my part. And I think it's been corrected in what we sent you. And that line's 573, I believe. Stacy or Michelle, was there any other, I know there was there any other?
Change on 5135588. It was increased $1,600 for an annual software program, but the line right after it was deleted, which was $1,000. So you'll actually only see a $600 total increase.
And just so everybody knows, I took the department budgets and put those sections, snipped those sections into an email and sent them out. And I asked department heads and constitutional officers to review that before today's workshop. And those were just a few of the things that were pointed out to me, requests made. And then just to follow up, we've talked about not having any new vehicles purchased out of this budget. In conversations last year, our electrical inspection has 3 vehicles, and they have 3 inspectors. And talked with JR about this, talked with Don Hawkins about this. And Don has the electrical inspection has a 2003 Durango, a 2008 Ford Escape, and a 2016 Ford Explorer. Well, the 2008 Ford Escape is staying in the garage quite a bit and is leaking water. And Don even says it has mold growing in it. But I talked to JR about this because their process, they process all those vehicles and work on them. And, JR says that vehicle it needs to be replaced. And, trying to stay consistent, we didn't want to add any new vehicles, but here's the bottom line. They've got 3 inspectors and 3 vehicles. And according to JR, we don't have any pool vehicles. What they need is some subcompact that has all-wheel drive, a compact, SUV or vehicle or truck that has 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. So I've not added that, but
Judge Covington,
yes.
you might just mention for the ones that don't know, that vehicle was the solid waste coordinators, J.R. Williamson's, and then it was the coroner's, John Goebels, and then passed on to electrical. So
It's had a long life.
Yes.
Here's the possible solution. Talking with Stacy today and Michelle, the possibility exists that we might be able to scrape together the money out of this year's budget to cover a different vehicle purchase. And we can talk about that, but I wanted to bring that up because our other people that requested vehicles said, hey, we can make it another year, but on this one, we might not be able to. And they have to do you got to have vehicles to do and we don't have anything to sub in. So I'll follow up with information about that and bring it to the court. If we can find the money out of this year's budget to replace that, it might be a requirement. What questions does any court member have or comments? And this is just an effort to my effort as judge to present to you all a starting point, and then you all review your consideration, and then with that we will go from there and try to get to a first reading later this week.
I have a question.
Yes, Kelly.
On the salaries, on the bottom of that worksheet we got, it said, I guess the adjustments, the overall is like 283,000. Is that after the second phase or after the last phase?
Jeff Mudrack, do you have that pulled up?
This would just be the cost of phase 2. The first phase, the total cost was about $725,000.
Right. And then we don't know, or do you have that number for the last phase? Because if I read this right, that'll be next year's budget, right?
Well, this phase 3 is the last phase.
Right, which will be next year's budget?
Correct.
Okay.
The recommendation is to put that into next year's budget.
But just out of curiosity, like if it's 283 after phase 2, what was the phase 3 number?
Well, this is what you're getting right now is phase 3. Phase 2 is just the part-timers.
Phase 2 is the part-timers.
Okay, so that 283 is after all these raises that we're looking at go into effect.
That's correct, on that sheet that you have right now, yes.
Gotcha.
And it impacts 77 full-time employees. Is that correct, Jeff?
It's 75, but you're real close.
Okay, I was close. Hand grenades and horseshoes. That's it.
It's close enough.
I had a couple of rookie questions. I wasn't for sure on the line items. What is protection to persons and property? I see that quite big numbers out beside that. What's all that encompass? Like general fund?
Sounds like you're looking at the jail.
Well, it's under general fund. It's under,
I usually-
yeah, I see it under jail specifically. And I thought I saw it somewhere else too.
And I'll kind of answer your question a little bit. I think a big number there that's changed was that protection to persons and property. The 911 communication system last year, I think we spent $4 or $5 million for, and this year it's like $1 million we're putting in. Is that right, Judge?
Yeah,
That's a big difference.
those numbers reflect what the city shared as what we have left to pay off that final pay, that final phase of that project.
But those are pretty big differences in those two line items from last year to this year. And that might be what you're looking at, I think.
So Dwayne, anything that falls under 5,100,
Yeah.
the DLG labels as protection to persons and property.
That's kind of what I figured, but I didn't know, that's a big number there. So I wasn't sure what all,
So if you page down and any number that falls under 5,100, that
that goes into that. Okay.
Now, Stacy, you want to guide us any on that?
Actually, this is Michelle. The property to persons and protection to persons and property number, that 9.8, is a cumulative number of all of the subsections that begin with 5.1 above. They're just capturing it. It's kind of
That's
a
what I was trying to
subtotal.
say.
So through all the different agencies, all the different groups.
No, it's all of the well, yes, each fund has a protection to persons and property section, I believe. Yes.
Okay. That's what if they don't, then that's fine. But most of them do, I guess, for somewhere. Another question was, what's there's a big number of a rental of fire plug, I think, on the counties.
Those
Like
are fire hydrants.
Why do we rent them? That was my only question. Is it
That's
something?
the name of the number in the DLG book. We don't rent them. Those are monthly payments for fire hydrants
Gotcha. Okay.
from the water company.
Gotcha. Yeah, I
These
pay those.
LG
I know what you're talking about now. I
Yeah,
pay
and
those.
once COVID's over, maybe you can come by one day and look at these DLG books and just get familiar with the numbers if you're interested.
I'm starting.
Dwayne, hey, Dwayne, the way because I was last year in the same boat you are this year, I look at the big picture of the general fund, the jail fund, and the road fund. And that's just the way I put them together in my head. The questions you have, Dwayne?
The only other one I thought about asking, or just something to think about, is petroleum projects. It might be a time to do more paving if petroleum prices are going to go down, and paving might be a cheaper. Something I'm looking at is if paving prices go down, might try to take advantage of it over the next year. I don't know if JR's got any insight on that or anything yet, but we could see, finally a decrease in that world. So just something to think about.
I mean, JR would never tell us that, last year we raised that line item to 1.25, 1,250,000 for paving projects. And this year we reduced it just a little bit, but, you point out a very good point that with petroleum going down, is asphalt going to go down? And if that's something you all want us to talk to JR about and see if there are any projections on that, and try to add a few miles of roads, certainly open to that. That's why we're doing this, to get your all's input. But that's something we can definitely get JR's feedback on. Mr. Wallace, Mr. Hostetler, Mr. Burke, y'all have any questions or comments in general? Okay.
I do.
Here's, go ahead. I'll go ahead, Rick.
Go ahead.
What I see is I want to look at the forecast going forward. I know we're only looking at what we're budgeting for 2020 and 2021. But in my mind, I need to think in long term as far as in under this aspect. What are we having carried over from this past budget year into next budget year? I know we're saving money on salt, I would assume. I know we're going to be short, or we're going to be saving money on our gas budget. You might be taking those monies to use toward that electrical inspection vehicle. Where other possibilities are there for revenue? Is it alcohol tax? Is it, or alcohol permits? What's your thoughts as far as in terms of going forward, if you're thinking there's a potential 30% cut in revenue? I mean, we looked at it, cutting expenses. What are we looking on the revenue side?
Chad, you bring up a good point, but I am not ever, the last ditch thing that I would ever do is talk about raising taxes. And like we can move forward with next year's budget, and I think we're comfortable. We have $18.6 million in our reserve, and you know, our effort is to try to protect that reserve in case things continue to go south. But you know, I don't want that as a item that I want to entertain right now, because I don't think we have to. I'd certainly open anybody.
I didn't say raise the taxes. I was looking for other additional revenue that might be coming. And I referenced the alcohol permits. That might be a small amount, or carryovers from this next
Yeah, the
year.
alcohol permits, as things exist today, the alcohol permits are, it's not.
That's zero right now.
Yeah, it's zero to speak of, because really the way it's set up right now is we can charge for the permit and the license, but we're not going to realize any, from what I understand, that we're not going to realize any change for that much of revenue based on sales or anything like that.
Just FYI for the ones that maybe haven't had time to scroll through the whole thing, the third to last page, the receipts, Michelle has a pretty good idea on some of these, and you can look down the line for general, road, and jail and see what the revenue's looking like.
I mean, I know that some insurance companies are giving deductions, and they're also giving rebates back to people because they're driving less. Is there any of that stuff on the board?
I mean, it's something that I can pursue, but on a big scale of things, I think, you know, and small things add up, but, you know, when you're talking about reducing your occupational license fee tax from, you know, to 9.8 million, you know, that's a significant reduction. And, you know, right now, we don't know where the bottom of this is. Right now, we are looking at, you know, what the governor shared as benchmarks for coming out of this. You know, the number one benchmark for coming out of this is 14 days of continued reduction in positive COVID-19 cases. And until we see those 14 days, I don't think the governor will move the state out of the current status that we're in. You know, and you know, that's the biggest, you know, that's the biggest block right now. And we're all praying, I know we are, that this thing continues, you know, the numbers will decline and we'll move out of the status we're in back to normalcy. You know, one of the things we need to think about transitioning back to normalcy or start is, you know, helping our community deal with making that transition. You know, do they have enough PPE? Do they have masks? Do they have cleaning supplies? And, you know, because if we don't have a plan for that, then we're going to be right back where we are, I'm afraid, with rebound cases. So, you know, we've got to have that consideration as well. But, you know, Chad, circling back to your big question, you know, what other, you know, when you said what other ways of revenue, that, you know, in my mind, that, you know, that's where I went with, you know, what I thought you were asking is that, you know, raising taxes. But that's not something I think we need to even look at right now, because the situation doesn't merit it right now. Bill Burke is wanting to talk. Bill, what do you have to add?
Bill, Pat, I was wondering, how much have we realized off the landfill over the past 4 months?
Bill,
How much do they owe us? And if they're still taking Lexington trash, might want to raise the tipping fees.
well, just in conversations, you know, in 2019, they had Central Kentucky Landfill. Happen to have it laying right here. They took in 405,000, might as well say 405,000 tons of municipal waste and other waste as well. And in conversations, Bill, with Rand and Tom Fitzgerald, we sent them a letter with concerns about the host agreement. At that time, Bill, this has been over, you know, it's over 8 or 9 months ago. They have not paid their tipping fee, and those funds would amount to an estimate of about 2019, around $200,000. And, you know, Rand and Tom Fitzgerald have addressed this, and it's something that's going to have to be, a resolution is going to have to be brought to that. And, you know, we're heading towards that, but I don't know exactly where we're going to go with that, but we'll have to have a resolution. And how we get there is yet to be determined, but I'm going to depend on Rand and Tom Fitzgerald for that. And there is a possibility, Bill, through some research we've done in the last couple of weeks, KRS allows fiscal courts to impose up to a 6.25 gross receipts license fee on gross receipts for municipal landfills. So we could elect to go that route if the court would like to. And that's an item that I was preparing to bring to you all at our next work session.
Okay.
That answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're missing $200,000 here, and you know, we're scraping around for pennies. $200,000 is a significant chunk of change. You know, it's for new police vehicles. It's a big chunk of a new fire truck. It's a lot of things to us.
Now that'd pay for a deputy jailer, and that'd pay for a deputy sheriff.
Yeah. I feel like we're getting played like a fiddle by these guys, you know, because they keep talking about, well, they were going to sell it. And then we've got somebody that wants us to hold off on a lawsuit so they can proceed with theirs. And then we've got this administrative law judge that was going to make a decision, you know, back in September, but wanted to wait till after the election. And now we're into March. And I just don't see us going forward with it.
Well, I can assure you that I've been working.
I know that, Joe. Yeah, there's absolutely no inclination that you're not doing anything. It's just that
right. It's frustrating
The wheels are turning slowly.
Yeah, it's frustrating to me, and I can assure you, we've had multiple conference calls with Tom Fitzgerald and Rand and myself and Jared in the last week. Rick sat in on one, I guess, yesterday, and trying to move forward. And for what it's worth, the Secretary, Ms. Goodman, for the Energy and Environment Cabinet, made an official ruling on the hearing officer's report related to waste services of the Bluegrass, McCall versus waste services of the Bluegrass. Fitz is analyzing that ruling and working on some items for the court's consideration as we speak. So
Still there?
revenue, that comment, and it's back to, we'll need to bring that up later, but it does directly relate to revenue that could impact our budget in the future, kind of along the lines of what Chad mentioned as well. So one item that I want to turn your attention to on the list is, it's something that we always talk about, and it's how to address requests from our nonprofit partners in the community. And you have a list there that we've shared, and one in particular that we didn't get nailed down and kind of has been discussed was the Kentucky Resource Council, and our representation is Tom Fitzgerald on items relating to the solid waste management plan and landfill. And Tom Fitzgerald is working representing us through the Kentucky Resource Council. And it's my opinion that the court, should consider a contribution to the Kentucky Resource Council for his time and effort. He's not billing us because his work is through that nonprofit. But I think the court ought to think about that, and I would value your input in regards to that about moving forward. And then any other comments or questions related to social service programs. And while we're talking about this, one item that I'll share with you all by email is the Amen House has been doing a huge amount of work during this COVID-19 event. And I believe their request for food's up over 30%. And I've been made aware that there's going to be essentially a COVID-19 community fund drive. And I'll share the specifics about it, but it's something that I would like the court to consider participating in because of the unique circumstance and the issues surrounding the event. They're feeding people, helping people, and it's above and beyond their regular normal year. And Transform Scott County is working with them on this project, and I've sat in and listened on some of the planning discussions, but it's something I'll bring to the court to consider out of here in April or May. Probably this week I'll bring it to you. But the one other thing that's on there that I want to bring your attention to that's different from last year is the CASA of Lexington. And I've had a request, a meeting with the mayor and myself and CASA of Lexington, court-appointed special advocate for children that are victims of abuse and neglect. And that is a real problem. They have outlined a plan to help with that. And right now, I cannot answer if the city's going to be able to partner with them, but we put that in there as yesterday after our budget meeting. I shared that I'd like for you all to consider that. And it does reflect a new item, but I think the need is real. And it's my job to bring something like this to you all and then let you all help make the decision. So I wanted to point that out, and I would have not been doing my job if I didn't put it on there, at least for your all's consideration. And would value any comments or questions related to that.
I would say yes to the case. Obviously, we've seen the need for years and years. Also, just to go back to mention, I have a 5 o'clock meeting actually on Zoom with Amen House, Gathering Place, and Transform Sky County. We're going to include them in the Finley 5K this year too, and try to do some profit sharing for them there. So one way to kind of help them out too is that you can, work with them through the Finley 5K, and we're going to try to help them raise some dollars there. So just FYI, that's going to be, hopefully something we get them involved with and get rolling. They're excited about it, so it should be good.
Mr. Hostetler, you have any comments? I think I cut you off a minute ago, and
I'm present.
all right.
Hey, I do have a couple of things. Just kind of, I missed very early on. I was a little late getting on board, and you may have commented, but one of the things you already commented on, and I just wanted to go back to it, was about with the jail and talking about the contracts with the CCA and the IOP. That CCA was the ankle bracelet thing that we talked about. I think you brought that up already. We
Home
talked about
incarceration.
that. Yeah, and the statement that you made that kind of made me remember that ankle bracelet was for circuit court, I guess, if those judges.
That's district and circuit court.
Oh, it is district. I only remember talking about circuit, but that's what I was trying to do, is bounce my own memory. But I guess my question is, you brought up about oversight, and I remember when we were talking about the ankle bracelet, what's that been, early this year or late last year when we talked about
fall.
it? Yeah.
Last fall.
Is oversight. And I remember asking the jailer, he was in court that day, but he said he had no input, no tie to that.
The jailer said all that was and set up was a tool for the judges to use. And, what was described by me would be, they would be nonviolent offenders that would, the judges use that as a tool in lieu of incarceration for nonviolent offenders. And,
right.
Once we set up the program, it's really in the hands of the judicial system and to use it as a tool. I don't have any oversight of.
Well, that was my question. I mean, but it's money the court's spending, but even through your office, there's no oversight. I mean, I get it. If
The circuit judge and the district judge are not calling me and saying, "Hey, do you think as a candidate for home?"
Gotcha. Right. I get that part of it, but that's the term that you use, oversight. I'm just trying to get clarification here. So so are those judges overseeing CCA?
Oh,
whatever that group is, what I mean?
The judges and the judges make the recommendation, and I'm sure that the county attorney or the Commonwealth attorney in collaboration with the individual's attorney make some type of recommendation to the judicial, the circuit or the district judge.
Well, who do those folks send the bill to? The
bill comes to the fiscal court.
Right. Well, that's all I'm saying. I'm just, usually there's somehow that you can say, okay, well, we only show 55 people and you're billing us for 60. I just made those numbers up.
No,
you see what I mean?
We get an invoice, and that invoice is reviewed, and then we pay the invoice on this end.
Right. I'm not saying there's anything going on, but I'm just saying if they're sending you an invoice, how do you know? I'm not saying
Rick,
there's any problems, but
Court orders.
yes, ma'am.
Rick, that actually happened this time. I just call Rand and clarify
Okay.
questions.
Okay. So there is a way to check and balance. I'm not saying that anybody can make mistakes even on their billing. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yes.
okay. All right. Well, that clears that up. Okay. Thank you, Stacy. That was it mostly. You already hit, I had a couple questions on some of the social service programs, but you already hit them just now, Judge. So,
What other questions does anyone else have?
I did have one other, and I think you and I talked about it. I don't know if you talked about it with anybody else. The recycling program. And right off the top of my head, I can't even find that category on here.
We have a joint, a shared
Right.
experience with the city, and a matching share that we pay. I'm trying, Stacy, can you help me? But let me just give you some backstory on that. And we've talked about it, Rick.
Right.
With Rumpke being approved to build a transfer station in Scott County, it came to my thought process that, could we approach Rumpke about consideration on handling our recyclable portion of municipal waste? And I've had a phone conversation with Adam Rumpke, a preliminary one. Adam's responded by looking at our stream of records on what's reported on the state level on recycling, and he is open for discussion to look at that if Rumpke could handle some of that or all of that possibly at their new location. I have shared that conversation and had that conversation, shared that email and had a conversation with the mayor, and the mayor's interested in looking at it, but wants to meet with Adam and discuss the ins and outs of it. And, that could be a plus for us. But I don't want to overpromise anything. It would be premature to do that. Rumpke is open to it. I've tried to open the door, and, it would increase, it just give us another option to look at.
Well, the reason I brought it up because, like you said, you and I have already talked about it, and it's kind of circling back to what Chad was talking about. That's an opportunity if it works out, and I realize it's a big if right now. But it sounds like Rumpke they are at least interested in looking at the potential and what it would cost and But it could be a savings for the county and the city potentially, and that kind of circles back to Chad's kind of question about new revenue sources of some sort. So, and of course, it's still a ways off because they're probably not going to be online with their new facility till late this year or early next, anyhow. So, but
we've got a little time, but I definitely wanted to have the conversation before they started construction and such, because if they were going to take some of that on or take all of that on, how would that impact their current plans? And that was part of my
sure.
With Mr.
I appreciate you doing that.
And then I want to circle back to where I started. One big part of the budget for the jail is that potential program partnership with either the Shepherd's House or the Isaiah House. And, the jailer, Mr. Broyles, has made it clear that he was not happy about that being in his budget because he didn't have any oversight of it. And, we went above and beyond to clarify with DLG, and we've called about 3 times to have this discussion. And, I understand and respect it, and I'll call back again. But here's the bottom line on this whole thing. is, will that program help individuals in Scott County? And could it also reduce our population in the jail? And the answer to both of those are a resounding yes. If you take $30 per day and multiply it out by 40 inmates over the course of the year, I think it's $438,000 that we would spend just calling it $30, and that's a conservative estimate. It'd be $438,000 is what I figured up the other day. If you look at our contract with that's been offered up by either Isaiah House or the Shepherd's House, both of those contracts are about half of that. Now, yes, we've got to consider a place for them to operate out of, and that's got to be a part of it. But if we're looking at physical responsibility, if we're looking at helping our individuals in our community, if we're looking at reducing the population at the detention center, all those things get check marked, and they're all positive. And I don't have a magic wand, but looking at the experience from both of those both those programs, Isaiah House and Shepherd's House, I think they both represent very good track records of having good results. And as judge executive, I'm doing everything I can to help our community and help those people that are struggling, but at the same time, be physically responsible and spend our taxpayers' dollars responsibly. And we don't have the room in our current jail to do a state substance abuse program. It's not there. So we have to look at other options right now. And the other option would be to build a $30 million jail or there. But I think what we're doing is the prudent thing, and it's the appropriate thing to address a real need in our community. And one day we'll have to build another jail, most likely. Yes. And in this budget, I put, and I think I've shared it with I don't know if I've shared it with the whole court, but my intent out of this budget is to spend, $7,500 to $10,000 on a feasibility study sometime during this FY21 to give us hard data about what a new jail would look like in the future sometime. But before we do any of that, I think what we're doing is the right thing. And I understand the concerns, but at the same time, I think we're doing what we should be doing. Bill, you're.
I'm right there with you. I think incarceration without rehabilitation, it does us no good. And I know we're incarcerating people, but I'm not convinced we're rehabilitating people. And if this helps us cross that bridge, I'm all for it. And I don't see any harm with trying it for a year or maybe two to see where we go. I think it's a noble effort. We should do it.
I appreciate that. And then one thing I want to point out again is whenever this COVID-19 event ends and we get where we can navigate, I've had numerous conversations with Judge Deals from Grant County. They have the beds. They want more inmates to participate in their substance abuse program. And if we can transfer an inmate that meets the requirements for the state substance abuse program to Grant County, and they participate in that program and come back to us after completing that program, the cost while they're at the Grant County substance abuse program is zero to Scott County taxpayers. So that's another aspect that's not reflected in the budget, but it would be a win-win-win for all of our community. So that's one thing that we still have working on, but we can't transfer inmates until this COVID-19 event goes by.
So there's nothing to keep us from going ahead and jumping in on that except for COVID.
Correct.
Okay.
And there'll have to be some type of agreement between Grant County and Scott
Some
County.
sort of MOA.
Right, but Judge Dills is all on board for that still, and I think that's a win as well. It's just getting through this kind of getting through this situation.
I'm like Bill, either one of those, I don't know which one's better than the other. I don't know. I haven't been to either one of them, but one of the two or one like that is something we got to try.
You know, if we can reduce the population by 5 or 10%, we've made a huge step. And again, I think incarceration without rehabilitation, we're just wasting our time. So let's put these folks through a program that they get something out of it, and hopefully we can turn some lives around. Yeah, that doesn't sound like the Bill Burke you're used to hearing.
Hold up, man.
I've mellowed a lot in the last 20 years.
Is there somebody else in that chair with a bill?
Well, I got to tell you, my business, I see the uglies every day. And, sometimes I just have to shake my head and walk away from it and think, what the hell are we doing as a civilization? And whatever it is we're doing a lot of it really, really bad. I'd like to see us do something good.
I'm with you. We've been at this about an hour. Does anybody have any recommendations for additions, any recommendations for edits, adjustment? And please know that you're free to email me, call me or Michelle or any of the budget committee. And if you have any recommendations, we can make that consideration, share it with everybody. And then that can be reflected in the first reading if the court wants to do so. But this was our effort at getting to this point, and I really appreciate David and Alvin and Michelle and Stacy and Jeff Mudrack's efforts and everybody's efforts. It's much appreciated. So if there's nothing else, then I'll close out. Everybody good? Be safe. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Sayonara.
All right.